The area of music has so much to offer anyone who's interested in oral environments and sound environments. And part of understanding our environment is to understand how we sound in the world, how we sound with our vocal apparatus. And that's not always the most easy and intuitive sensibility to be in touch with. And it makes a difference. You know, there's this whole literature on compassion fatigue. But I submit that I think that compassion fatigue has a little more to do with communication fatigue. That in fact, when I speak to my healthcare students, you know, my students in public health or certainly clinical fields, I often suggest that one of the voices that is commonly taught, the "how are we doing today?" the sort of very service industry-oriented voice is exhausting to perform. And I'll remind them of what the Dalai Lama has said in many circumstances in answer to the question that Richie Davidson or Daniel Goleman will ask, which is, why do you think it is that so many people like you around the world? And there's a bit of a bias in that. But the Dalai Lama often answers that I try to treat everyone I meet, even if it's for the first time, as if I'm meeting an old friend. Similarly, think of how your voice sounds when you're speaking to somebody you know very well. When you speak to an old friend, a good friend, you're using a part of your voice and you're speaking from an area of comfort that's very much who you are, right? You're not putting anything on. You're not using your head voice in order to communicate up here, and you're not pretending to be so cool and whatever down here. You're speaking to them like my best friend Alan. Hey Alan, how's it going? You wouldn't believe what happened today. That voice that's really comfortable for me is a combination between head, chest, and diaphragmatic voice. It's the most true voice I am. It's really how I sound when I'm really comfortable in the world. And, you know, there was a study years ago that had to do with percentages of communication acuity, how we communicate in the world. And it was sort of published in terms of its numbers. So 55% is through body language, of how we communicate, how we make meaning in the world, right? How we register meaning on our minds, how we understand meaning to be conveyed. 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is the actual text, the actual words that are being said. So when we're texting, we're actually leaving out, 93% of what we need as humans to feel like we're efficiently communicating ideas. Which is why I really don't like texting. I like WhatsApp or I'm not publicizing WhatsApp, but I like apps that involve a recorded message where I can at least convey the 7 plus 38%. So this idea of how we speak in the world and how we articulate ourselves as human communicators has very much to do with compassion, and I'll explain what I mean. My first experience with music research had to do right here at U of T with a study dealing with mother-infant communication. And it was at the Center for Human Learning and Development, an acronym for the word child, in the Infant Studies Division of the Psychology Department at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. It was run by Sandra Tree Hub, and in her lab there was a PhD student, Laurel Traynor, who's now a major researcher at McMaster University, still in mother-infant communication. And my task was I had several tasks. One of them was to find mothers from different languages around the world, based in Toronto, who are willing to sing to their infants in their own native tongue, in their own native language. So Bengali, Hindi, Cantonese, any kind of whatever their language was, their native language, sing in that language to their infants. And then we administered these listening experiments. And just to bring a relatively shorter version of the story, we tried to understand what we were hearing. We were hearing either the infant was present in the recording or the mother was speaking to a recording as if her infant would hear it later, but that she was doing something with her voice when communicating with her own infant in the present moment. And we found out that she's using a more regular pulse, so that itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout, right? So this regular pulse, because she has an audience of one who's responding to this rhythmic message, right? And mothers, when speaking with their infants, will also use more dynamics. Dynamic variation has to do with loud and soft, or more volume or less volume, to simplify it. There was also a breathier tone if her infant was present. And there was this other quality that had to do with something we couldn't quite put our finger on. And we were thinking about it, and I said, well, we can hear that she's smiling and that she's loving her infant. It's almost like there's a compassionate tone in her voice, a mother's compassionate tone. And it was at that moment when this room full of professors, quite, with, tens and tens of publications to their names, all nodded and said, that's it. It's a compassionate tone. That's what we're hearing. So we tried to understand what was happening using spectrographs and so forth, what was happening vocally to make a compassionate tone. But I submit that there's something very special. And if we are, this sacred bond between mother and infant, of course, is very, very unique in the world. But if we can bring into healthcare this knowledge and apply a compassionate tone in caregiving, as healthcare providers, how does that change the tone of our communication? If we have a compassionate tone, how does that change the tone of our relationships with each other, with the healthcare team, or with, clinicians and their patients, and as educators and students and so forth? So I think the tone with which we speak, the tone with which we care about each other in the world and communicate, can be a very powerful way of not being exhausted, not having fatigue, but actually being in touch with something fundamentally human that we all have in common, which is the need to be loved and the need to express love with and for others.